The effects of climate change on polar ice caps and wildlife. Introduction. The Earth's polar regions, encompassing the Arctic and Antarctic, are some of the most vulnerable areas to the impacts of climate change. The melting of polar ice caps and glaciers is one of the most visible and alarming consequences of global warming, with far-reaching implications for the ecosystems and wildlife that call these frigid environments home. In this article, we will explore the profound effects that climate change is having on the polar ice caps and the diverse array of species that depend on these fragile habitats for their survival. Melting of polar ice caps. The Arctic and Antarctic are warming at more than twice the global average rate, a phenomenon known as Arctic amplification. As a result, the polar ice caps are experiencing an unprecedented rate of melting and retreat. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, Arctic sea ice extent has decreased by 12.8% per decade since 1979, with the lowest recorded minimum occurring in 2012. Similarly, the Greenland ice sheet, the second largest ice mass on the planet, has been losing an average of 279 billion tons of ice per year since 2002. The loss of polar ice has far-reaching consequences. As the reflective white surface of the ice disappears, it exposes the darker ocean and land, which absorb more solar radiation, further accelerating the melting process. This positive feedback loop is contributing to the rapid transformation of the polar regions, with profound implications for the global climate system. Impacts on polar wildlife. The melting of polar ice caps has severe repercussions for the diverse array of wildlife that inhabit these regions. Many species have evolved to thrive in the unique conditions of the Arctic and Antarctic, and they are now facing existential threats due to the rapid environmental changes. Polar bears, perhaps the most iconic and well-known species threatened by climate change, are the polar bears. As sea ice shrinks and becomes thinner, polar bears are forced to spend more time on land, where they have limited access to their primary prey, seals. This has led to a decline in their body condition and overall population. According to the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, polar bears are currently classified as vulnerable, with a projected population decline of 30% by 2050. Walruses, another iconic Arctic species, rely on sea ice as a platform for resting, breeding, and nursing their young. As the sea ice melts, walruses are forced to haul out on land in large, overcrowded groups, which can lead to increased mortality, especially among calves. The loss of sea ice has also made it more difficult for walruses to access their preferred prey, such as clams and other mollusks. Seals, such as the ringed seal and the bearded seal, are also facing significant challenges due to the melting of polar ice. These species rely on sea ice for breeding, molting, and resting. As the sea ice retreats, seals are forced to travel longer distances to find suitable habitat, expending more energy and facing increased risks of predation and disturbance. Penguins in the Antarctic. The melting of glaciers and sea ice has had a profound impact on penguin populations. Emperor penguins, for example, are highly dependent on stable sea ice for breeding and raising their chicks. As the sea ice becomes less reliable, the breeding success and overall population of these charismatic birds have declined. Migratory birds. The polar regions are also critical stopover and breeding grounds for numerous migratory bird species, such as shorebirds, waterfowl, and seabirds. The loss of sea ice and changes in the timing of ice melt can disrupt the delicate balance of these migratory patterns, leading to the decline of many bird populations. Cascading ecosystem effects. The impacts of climate change on polar wildlife are not limited to individual species. They also have far-reaching consequences for the entire ecosystem. As the foundation of the polar food web, the loss of sea ice and its associated species can have cascading effects, disrupting the intricate web of predator-prey relationships and altering the flow of energy and nutrients throughout the ecosystem. For example, the decline of ice-dependent species, such as seals and polar bears, can lead to increased predation on other species, such as caribou and reindeer, which may be less able to adapt to the changing environment. Additionally, the loss of sea ice can disrupt the productivity of the marine ecosystem, reducing the availability of food for a wide range of species, from zooplankton to whales. Conservation efforts and challenges. Recognizing the urgent need to address the impacts of climate change on polar regions, various conservation organizations and governmental agencies have implemented a range of initiatives to protect these fragile environments and the wildlife that call them home. One of the primary strategies is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate the root causes of climate change. This involves transitioning to renewable energy sources, improving energy efficiency, and implementing policies and regulations to limit emissions. International agreements, such as the Paris Agreement, aim to limit global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, with efforts to keep it to 1.5 degrees C. In addition to emissions reduction, conservation efforts in the polar regions have focused on protecting critical habitats, reducing human disturbance, and promoting sustainable resource management. For example, the establishment of marine protected areas, the regulation of commercial activities, and the implementation of wildlife monitoring and research programs are all important components of these conservation initiatives. However, the pace and scale of climate change presents significant challenges to these efforts. The rapid melting of ice caps and the associated ecosystem changes are outpacing the ability of many species to adapt, and some species may be facing irreversible declines or even extinction. Conclusion. The effects of climate change on the polar ice caps and the wildlife that depend on these fragile environments are profound and far-reaching. As the planet continues to warm, the loss of sea ice and glaciers is having a devastating impact on iconic species, such as polar bears, walruses, and penguins, as well as the broader ecosystem. Addressing these challenges will require a multifaceted approach, including aggressive emissions reduction, habitat protection, and the implementation of targeted conservation strategies. The future of the polar regions and the diverse array of species that call them home hangs in the balance, and the actions we take today will have lasting consequences for generations to come.